Greetings from Costa Rica, and thank you very much for joining me for this Costa Rica real estate chat. My name is Matt Rosensteel. I'm with Coldwell Banker Pacific Realty here in Playa Junquial. Excited to be seated in a new set today because we're actually doing some remodeling here to our humble office in Plaza Tierra Pacifica. Regular viewers of my channel will notice that the wall behind me has changed in color. Every Friday live at noon, I try to be here answering questions about Costa Rica real estate for my absolutely enormous audience. If you have questions, if you're watching live, feel free to post them in the comments and I will do my best to get to them. If you just want to send some love, let us know where you're watching from. Send a shout out. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. As always, I really want to start out by dedicating my show to all of those people out there, my clients, who have decided to hire me for real estate transactions in Costa Rica. More and more, I meet people who don't take that decision. They've watched my channel, they decide to buy property somewhere nearby my hometown, and they never pick up the phone and give me a call so that I can actually put bread and butter and all of the other good things on the table for my family. So to all those people out there, most recently, we're talking about Kurt, George, and Mai. Also to John, huge client who honestly, we're talking about different outcomes than a closing, but somebody who's been patient. And everybody who's going to close this year, people who are currently working with me, thanks so much for supporting my business. If you aren't already a subscriber, do be sure to subscribe to my channel. I have tons of Costa Rica videos on every aspect of moving here, not just real estate, although that tends to be my focus. And if you're ready to contact me, you've decided to invest in real estate here, and it's time to reach out to Costa Rica, Matt, here is my email address where you can contact me at any time of day. Again, our topic today is why hasn't it sold? In Costa Rica, you see that real estate listings can tend to sit on the market. And very often, from the buyer's perspective, I get some frustration not understanding, well, how the heck has this been on the market so long? And it still has the same asking price or even a bigger price than it did last year. So if you're a buyer out there, you might immediately say, well, of course, it's the price. Guanacaste real estate is just overpriced. But time and time again, I want to tell you that it's not just price. And today we're going to focus on 3 big reasons that Costa Rica real estate listings may stay on the market here in Guanacaste, none of which are price. And then finally, yes, we will cave and talk about price as well. Stay tuned. Cheers to everybody watching today. Again, if you want to send a quick shout out, we have Paint Escapes. Thanks very much for watching. Took me a little bit to get your very clever username there. I'd be happy to answer questions that come up as we talk about our topic today. Why do Costa Rica real estate listings stagnate? We're not going to focus on price exclusively. We're going to discuss 3 important topics so that you can get a better understanding of the real estate market here, whether you are buying or selling. Let's talk about my first biggest point. The Costa Rica market, this one that we're talking about on my channel here in Guanacaste, is largely a market of foreigners either buying or selling real estate to each other or from the Costa Rican development companies that are producing a lot of stuff out here. This is still 99% a cash market for foreigners, with new lending opportunities really only representing those same tough mortgage rates and tough terms that people can't generally swallow. That cash market dynamic here in Guanacaste is always going to mean that things move slower here than they do in the US or Canada. You wouldn't believe the difference in people's motivation to buy property when they realize that they are actually going to have to pay full cash for something here in Costa Rica versus being able to enter into a 30-year mortgage. Pardon me for 1 second. That cash dynamic means that our average listing period here, any time of year and in any economy, is always going to be a multiple of the typical listing period in hot markets in the US or Canada. We almost never had those moments where listings were selling within 1 day. The only time that started to happen was in early 22 as people were rushing in again after COVID. That was only for properties that were priced extremely accurately and that had those prime locations. But overall, you can depend on Costa Rica being 5, 10, 15, 20 times slower than markets like San Antonio or even Indianapolis or places where you have people buying with mortgages. Because really a debt-fueled housing market is a completely different ballgame than our luxury market down here, where people are deciding to spend their absolutely hard-earned cash on a property down here. That has the same effect on sellers. They are typically people who own their properties in Guanacaste outright, and so they don't have as big of a problem with longer listing periods. They're not going to price their property to sell within 3 months, that feeling the pressure of that mortgage. They're going to price that property a lot of times thinking that, man, I would really like to use it again come Christmas, and I wouldn't have too big of a problem if it didn't sell until January. So sellers can absolutely be slower to move in Costa Rica, and just overall, you are looking at a slower market than you are in the US or Canada. So if you're trying to evaluate how, real estate's sitting here, keep in mind that beginning baseline that we are far slower than the US and Canadian markets. Next, I want to make a point about sellers. And yes, this can be an absolutely big driver behind properties not moving faster. Sellers are loath to prepare properties properly, and proper preparation is a principal prerequisite for a successful sale. I love my alliteration there. But essentially what it boils down to is that very often sellers don't want to invest any more in their property down here. They've also become accustomed and comfortable with a very basic standard of living over however long they've owned it. They might have a condo where they've let a lot of things go, lime build up on the fixtures, ugly tile has stayed in there, on and on and on. And they really just don't want to spend any more money. They want to get out of the property. But I've been on so many showings where you're in homes, condos, all kinds of properties that have an outdated feeling. They have low lighting. Oftentimes, the sellers have the properties rented, and all of these obstacles can really make it difficult for that property to ever find a buyer. Really, you have to give people the psychological feeling when they enter your listing that they're welcome, that it's in good condition, and that, frankly, that it wouldn't be a big project for them. In Costa Rica, a huge percent of our foreign buyers have huge fear related to doing any remodeling or repairs on a new purchase. So sellers do themselves a disservice by leaving it in its old condition. And many times you find that the price you have to come down to in order to finally motivate a buyer down here in Guanacaste is going to be a huge discount compared to the small amount it would have cost you to do some of those basic upgrades. And really, I see a lot of sellers err on the side of not touching their home, leaving it in that darker, mustier, sort of dated feeling, specifically here in Guanacaste, and it can be almost impossible to snag a buyer when properties are in that condition. So you really have to understand as well, if you go somewhere and you don't feel inspired by it and it's been on the market for a while, yes, everybody who has visited previous to that has also not felt inspired. And really, when it comes time to write that cash check to actually purchase the property, all of that low lighting, the outdated feeling of the property can compound in a prospective buyer's mind, and they decide not to buy it. Before I go on to my third reason here, I really wanted to also mention, obviously people will say entirely that price has been the factor here in Guanacaste and why real estate listings sit. I don't want to negate that, and we will talk about prices. However, I want to encourage buyers basically to understand that Guanacaste is a market with extreme scarcity of certain things. And that's because it's always been difficult to create inventory here. You didn't see huge numbers of successful gated communities make it through the 2009 crisis. You don't see lots of developers who are able to buy parcels of land and produce condos and homes, at least easily, because of the difficult business climate, the complicated, cultural issues, the environmental restrictions, on and on and on. So this is a market where you do have scarce inventory, and yes, sellers are notoriously stubborn in some of these beach communities where they love their property. However, if you're a buyer, what you have to understand is that rather than making a list of demands and putting a price on it, what you really need to do is take a different approach. Make your list of the kind of property that you want to see. Pick your location or which locations would be good for you. Decide how many beds and baths, how close to the beach. Decide how nice you would need that property to be, and go take a look at those listings. If those listings are twice as much as you have in your bank account, unfortunately, it just may be that a Guanacaste home, which is a scarce asset, really when you take into account that particular location, the particular style, that distance to the beach, that scarce asset may not be in your future, and rather just immediately kicking it back to price, it may be that this is a luxury item that really isn't just something you can afford when you look at your list of wishes. John Miller, I'm so glad you joined in live. I'm absolutely dying for some more comments. How you been? No, I appreciate you joining as always, John. If anybody has questions about what I've been discussing so far, feel free to chime in. My next point as to why listings can sit on the market here was actually inspired by an experience I had the other day when, yes, I do lose listings. I don't sell every single property I have. And in fact, a client of mine had asked, why has this sat on the market? The point I'm about to discuss is how certain realtors act and function here in Guanacaste. And one of the biggest things that can hold back a piece of real estate from selling is when you find a listing agent who operates in a very classic Guanacaste sort of old school realtor way. And you'll see listing agents who exclusively show their listings. And the reason I'm inspired by this is the person said, well, they pointed out that my brokerage did have the listing for a full year, but I did not point out that during that full year, certain agents had never shown my listing, and certain agents will never show listings outside their brokerage. If you want to see a property sell here, your first step toward actually doing so is definitely to hire a broker who is as collaborative as possible. And one of the things that I emphasize with the agents that we train in our office is absolutely that co-brokering more deals year in and year out is an amazing business strategy that grows your volume way faster than only showing your listings. You also have an ethical responsibility as a realtor, but you will see that lots of listings in Guanacaste, some of the ones that have been on the market for the longest time, some of the listings that end up walking in my door asking for a marketing boost, those listings have been there because a listing agent frequently will take an absolutely tunnel vision approach. They are operating to try and sell only exclusive listings and do dual-sided transactions where it's in their client's best interests and their business's best interests to do the exact opposite and show everybody's listings every time. Finally, let's talk about the obvious reason why listings can stagnate on the market. And yes, price is involved here in Guanacaste. However, I also want to re-emphasize that frequently stubborn sellers are rewarded because eventually their property can sell at what was originally interpreted as a high price. In my local market, absolutely, when we list properties above what the most recent comp was, we're taking into account, first of all, that values have gone up since 2021, obviously. Second of all, we're very much accounting for that increasing scarcity of certain items. For example, the government passed a land segregation law 4 years ago that made it much more difficult to create these little beachside parcels that suddenly are, the remaining available pieces of real estate are, worth notably more because you won't have developers who can do that. So yes, you do have sellers who have gone high with their listing prices, partially out of greed, because nobody wants to make less money than they would be offered. Partially, they're doing it out of a high opinion of their property. And yes, you see that high opinion is formed by the fact frequently that they designed a property. They'll say, this has perfect features, airflow, the feng shui is absolutely optimized in this house, etc. And that's part of the reason they will stand by their high price and a listing may stagnate. Obviously, they're also just stubborn by nature, as human beings tend to be. If you think sellers are the only people who are stubborn, you definitely have something to learn about everybody from children through adult human beings. Want to check really quick. Do we have questions? Did my neighbor's property sell yet? If not, raffle it. Sell 600 tickets at one. Absolutely, John. I think selling real estate by raffle would be interesting. However, I'm not ready to coordinate a raffle, and it brings me back to traumatic memories of fundraising for our nonprofit and doing all kinds of raffles and things that I thought would be a no-brainer for me, and ending up on the last night with, half of the tickets, which in your case would be a $300,000 boo-boo on my balance sheet if I ended up trying that raffle. Absolutely, Trevor. Hope that you can make it down. At the community event, I wanted to mention next month's community event on February 1st in Tamarindo. I am actually going to be in the United States of America on a very quick trip home. My parents could use a quick bit of help. I need to sprint home and see them. So I booked a ticket and I will be getting back into the country that evening. There will be another meet and greet on February 1st, 4:30 to 6:30, the exact same program. We will have folks from the Coldwell Banker Pacific Realty team that go to the event. There will be plenty of free sponsored drinks, live music, tons of fun as always. That's at Surf Shack, February 1st. We're doing it the first Thursday of every month from here onward. It just so happened that, yes, I need to book it up to the United States of America. To conclude, folks, really, as we talk about the different factors for why Costa Rica real estate sits on the market, the biggest reason I want to identify is the fact that this is a cash market. And if you're a buyer seeing a listing that has sat there for 3, 6, or 9 months, you're actually looking at a typical listing period. And if it sells before that year ends, it's actually been somewhat adequately priced for the market. You do only rarely see listings sell under a month or under 2 months. You would usually see that associated with the kind of fire sale or motivated seller advertising. And in the vast majority of cases, real estate will seem like it sits on the market and like you might be able to get some leverage with a seller because their house is old, it feels outdated, the lighting is bad, etc. It may have been on the market for 6 months. But for example, if a property is listed going into the low season, really 6 months is almost nothing here in the Guanacaste market for a property to sell at an adequate cash price. Anyhow, folks, it has been a pleasure as always. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, hit that like, comment button, whatever you can do to boost me up there. Really appreciate all of you tuning in today.